Today I am talking about pain with sexual activity. When someone comes to me experiencing pain with any sort of sexual activity, whether they have vaginas or whether they have penises, oftentimes when I evaluate and assess these people, there is a component where I have to teach them how to breathe properly. There are many reasons why re-educating how someone's breathing and bringing more awareness to their breathing pattern, that's such a key focus in my work. Pelvic floor muscles near your diaphragm, which is your main breathing muscle. Whenever the diaphragm drops, the pelvic floor should also be elongating and recoiling back. They're both doing that in sync with each other. If someone is not breathing well and expanding laterally through their ribs and getting the breath in through the nose and down into the diaphragm, the pelvic floor doesn't have as much of what's called excursion. If the diaphragm doesn't have adequate excursion, the pelvic floor is not going to have adequate excursion. That is one reason why I teach breathing. There may be a lot of tension in the pelvic floor muscles because the breathing pattern is of such that you're really breathing a lot up here all day. There's a lot of tension in the chest and the neck, and you're unable to bring that breath down lower. The second reason why I emphasize re-educating the breathing pattern whenever there's pelvic pain is because when there is stress in our lives, it's really important to recognize that tensing the pelvic floor muscles is a common response to stress in people who have scrotums and people who have vulvas, in people who have penises and people who have vaginas. Doesn't matter what type of anatomy you have, everybody has a stress response that is a reflex, which research has shown. There were people, specifically women, who reported pelvic pain who got their upper traps hooked up and their pelvic floor musculature hooked up so they could see the activity in those muscles, and they were compared to a group of people who did not report any pelvic pain, and they showed them video clips, a neutral video clip, an erotic video clip, a threatening video clip, and a sexually threatening video clip. And they noticed that both groups, whenever they felt threat, they tensed their pelvic floor and their upper traps, denoting that tensing our pelvic floor is a reflex, is a response to a stressful, threatening situation. Some of us have gotten into a habitual motor pattern where our bodies may be under stress so chronically that there's never a letting go of the pelvic floor muscles. And because a deep nasal diaphragmatic breath starts to stimulate the nervous system to shift into a state of relaxation, sometimes that is what is needed to disengage the system out of a flight or fight pattern, or sometimes when that progresses to a disembodied presentation, the breath can bring someone back, as well as it can downregulate the nervous system and allow for other work, other therapies to be done to the pelvic floor more directly. In people who have testicles and people who have scrotum, the sperm undergoes a process in the testicles where the sperm matures. There is a muscle called the cremaster muscle that helps to regulate the temperature, and it also has a response to stress. And the body senses that it is warm the cremaster muscle will relax and it will drop the testicles away from the body as to not overheat the maturing sperm. When the body senses it is cold, the cremaster muscle will reflexively respond by contracting and drawing the testicles in towards the body. The scrotum comes in towards the body to help protect, again, the maturing sperm. However, whenever the person is under fire, under stress, under pressure, there could be a chronic response where the cremaster muscles and other pelvic floor muscles that help draw the scrotum up and the pelvic floor up, those muscles could be in a motor pattern of chronic tension. And without the awareness of being able to really have a sense of, am I stressed and how do I know? That, I would say, is such a difficult thing to embody. Am I stressed and how do I know? What are my sensations in my body? Over time, you can absolutely learn, wow, my pelvic floor is tight, simply through a body scan without necessarily having to touch or see. Once that becomes an embodied understanding, you can work to then breathe and let it go and bring more attention and awareness to the letting go aspect. And sometimes that is what's needed to bring the body out of a state of tension and help contribute to situations where one is engaging in sexual activity and it's painful if the pain is being driven by chronic tension, the lack of letting go. Sexual activity is creating more muscular contraction or potentially trying to stretch the tissue for penetration of any sort, then all of those things can become painful. If one relies on breath holding to achieve orgasm, then that's even more tension and more pressure potentially stacked on a pelvic floor that's already chronically under fire and under tension. And all of that creates a recipe for a lot of tension and potentially a lot of spasms and therefore a lot of pain or discomfort and dysfunction in other ways. In my course, Holistic Solutions to Your Pelvic Problems, I'm so excited. There is a component of the course where you will be taught how to scan your body for tension, for discomfort, for any triggers that indicate I don't feel safe. This doesn't have to be made out to be so dramatic, like that there was some sort of assault or some sort of abuse. Those are absolutely common experiences that many people have, but the program doesn't have to revolve around that. So many of us are simply stressed because our inbox is full. So many of us are stressed because we don't know when our next check is going to come. So many people are stressed simply out of the circumstances of the pandemic and beyond. So it's not always about assault and abuse when it comes to the pelvis, and that is what I try to emphasize to so many people. Sometimes there is chronic tension around the pelvis out of a habitual tensing response that is normal and reflexive for all of us, and it goes into an overdrive. The body over relies on that tension pattern to deal with stressors and stressful circumstances, and it's been life-changing for me to be able to become more clear about what does stress feel like in my body, where do I hold it, and it literally has been my saving grace under this pandemic to be able to scan, check in, implement a technique or a practice, and keep it moving. So that is going to be a huge piece of my program, and I'm going to go into other techniques to relaxing the pelvic floor and breathing techniques. So I'm really excited, and if you want to join me, you have one more week. I'm closing the doors on September 26th. So if you want to join me, there's a link in my bio if you're on Instagram, and there's a link down below if you're on YouTube. I'm so excited. I hope you join me.